Today's case is going to make you mad because it could have been prevented. People being stalked is nothing new. Women in particular being stalked is nothing new. And we're going to be talking about Molly. She was stalked, threatened, and terrorized. So she did the bravest, terrifying thing. She went to the police. She told them everything. They listened, they believed her, and they arrested the guy. She finally felt like she could breathe. And then the worst thing happened. This is the story of a woman who was promised protection by every system that was supposed to help her, and instead, she was given what her parents called false hope. Just 16 days after her stalker was released onto the streets on horrific charges, Molly had no chances left. This is the case of Molly Ticehurst, and is a story of an unimaginable, infuriating failure at every single level. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, hi, my name is Zara, and on this channel, we dive deep into true crime cases, really get into the stories, and talk about the victims who deserve to be remembered. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, please join the fam, hit that subscribe button right over here, maybe give this video a like, and share it around if you can. It takes like 2 seconds, guys, and it massively helps the channel out, and it just means so much to me. So to everyone that did it, thank you so much. Also, if you want to get to know each other a little bit more, you can consider becoming a channel member. You get instant access to our private Discord server where we can chat one-on-one about, well, anything and everything. So just hit that join button right below this video to get in. Okay, now let's get into this case. We are headed to Forbes, New South Wales, Australia. And I feel like I've been doing so many cases from New South Wales, but Forbes is a small rural town in the Central West region, and it's known for its gold rush history and even its links to famous bush rangers like Ben Hall. And bush rangers are basically outlaws who used the wilderness to their advantage and commit crimes. But in 2024, it's a farming community, a really small, tight-knit place with less than 10,000 people living there. The local council website literally describes Forbes as a safe place to live with a strong sense of community. It's the kind of place where everyone is supposed to feel safe, where neighbors know each other. And that is where 28-year-old Molly Ticehurst lived. Molly was born to her parents, Tony and Kate, and she had a sister named Heather, who all knew her as just a total ray of sunshine. She was a mom first and foremost, and she had a 6-year-old son from a previous relationship, and her son was her entire world. She also absolutely loved her job. She was an early childhood educator working at a local center called the Forbes Learning Ladder. And she wasn't just someone who was clocking in and clocking out. Her colleagues, her friends, and the community all said she was amazing at what she did. The director of the center, Aidan Clark, called her a naturally gifted educator. Her father, Tony, who you will hear a lot about in this story, shared this one memory about his daughter that perfectly described who she was. He said it was just a joy to just walk down the street with her because all of these little kids from her center would spot their beloved educator and they'd run up to her, dragging their parents and just yelling, "Mom, Dad, it's Molly." She was loved. She radiated care and compassion, which was at the very core of who she was, not only as a friend, not only as a coworker, but especially as a mom. She was a daughter, a friend, and a vital part of her community. Molly was a single mom for a while, focusing on her son and her career. But eventually she started a new relationship with a man called Daniel Billings. Now, there isn't a lot of public information about Daniel's life before he met Molly. We know that he was 29 years old at the time and that he was originally from a town called Dalby in Queensland, which is a different state. But as for his parents, his upbringing, his siblings, or what he even did for a living, the record's pretty much silent. But I did find out that he was married to another woman in 2018, and there's this wedding video out there, and all he's doing is shadowboxing the entire time. So he got married in the Philippines to a woman he met, I believe, at the meat factory in Dalby, and they had a son together after the marriage, but eventually split up soon after. We don't know exactly how he met Molly or what was good in their relationship. What we do know based on court documents is that their relationship was toxic and that it had ended. But Daniel did not accept that it was over. The allegations that Molly would eventually report to the police were honestly horrific. Molly essentially endured a calculated campaign of terror that spanned from June 2023 all the way to April 2024. I tried to find out reports or information about the relationship prior to it turning bad, but there was nothing I could find. And it kind of seems like their relationship was toxic from the get-go. And Molly seemingly tried to escape the situation immediately. So we know that they began the relationship early 2022 and broke up in June 2023. And then they soon got back together before breaking up for the final time in December of 2023. But every time they broke up, things would go off. Molly alleged that Daniel was stalking her, that he was intimidating her. And, she's not saying he just sent her a few angry text messages. He allegedly escalated to even destroying her property. He was accused of smashing her car window and breaking other things at her house, like a pedestal fan. And then to show Molly how serious he really was, he committed an act so sick, so cruel, he should have been locked up for this alone. After they ended things for the final time in December of 2023, Daniel packed up his things from Molly's house and took with him their little Dachshund puppy, the little sausage dogs, which they had only got together a month prior, so November 2023. Later, Daniel killed their 12-week-old puppy. He would admit to killing the puppy by hitting it with a hammer, and he later told police that he killed it because he had nowhere to put it. I just have to pause there. We know, and law enforcement knows, that animal cruelty is one of the biggest, brightest, flashing red light predictors of future violence. It's a tool of coercive control, especially the fact that it was their puppy together. It's a threat. See what I can do to something you love? I can do it to you. In fact, it was later reported that Daniel had threatened Molly, "I will get to you quicker than the police will." So, that's a massive red flag. So on January 4th, 2024, soon after the breakup, they exchanged a series of text messages that honestly is very upsetting. And it starts with, "I'd never harm you." And she says, "Honestly, I thought you could have last night. I've never seen that side of you and it frightened me." He said, "I've told you before, I don't beat women. Yeah, I was angry, no doubt. When you lose everything, it'll make you a bit mad. You must not have ever known me then if you think I'd be capable of throwing my hands at you." She said, "Didn't know what you were capable of last night." He ends with, "I'd never hit a woman. I'm not a fucking coward like some." Then on January 19, 2024, they exchanged more text messages with Daniel wanting closure over the relationship. He said, "Give me closure and it'll be like I never existed." And she said, "What more do you want?" And he said, "My head needs it." But his actions against Molly went even darker than the puppy, than breaking her things. Molly also alleged that Daniel had raped her, not just once. Molly specified 3 separate counts of sexual intercourse without consent. So one of these incidents took place on March 4, 2024. Molly meets Daniel in the car park of a Harvey Norman, which is like a big electrical furniture store. And she got into his ute and drove to a soccer field. I'm not sure why they met. I honestly think he was just harassing her to talk at this point, and then she agreed. But once she was in his car, he pulls a knife from the driver's seat and threatened to kill her. He then assaulted Molly. This is the level of terror she was living with. Her parents, Tony and Kate, later said that Molly was understandably very worried and fearful about going to the police. And can you blame her? It's such a common and heartbreaking reality for so many victims. You're afraid of what he'll do if you report. You're afraid of how far he'll go if you don't report. You're afraid the police won't believe you. You're afraid that even if they do believe you, they won't be able to protect you. On 27th March 2024, further text messages show that Daniel repeatedly contacted Molly, claiming that he can't cope without her. She responded, "Why do you want to kill me? Why do you do all that bad stuff to me?" And he replied, "Maybe my thought process was if I couldn't have you, then I didn't want anyone to." You guys know where this is going. He texted her again in early April, telling her that he could not accept the end of their relationship despite her begging to leave her alone. And she confronted him by saying, "You think there's still a chance for us? It was hard enough trusting you after knowing you killed our dog, and I had to lie to people about it, threatened my family and animals, smashed my window, and was going to stab me in the neck. So please, for the last time, leave me alone." And he replied by saying this, "I don't know what to do without you. I just want to be cuddled to sleep one last time." Then on April 3rd, 2024, he calls her, and it wasn't a friendly call. Even after, he's asking to be cuddled one more time, he called her 15 times over a 12-minute period. When they finally spoke, he said, "I will come in the middle of the night and cut your fucking head off. I will get to you if that's the last thing I do. The police won't stop me. I will get to you quicker than they will. This isn't over. I have only just begun." You can only imagine after this how terrified Molly was. I'm sure she had heard him make threats like this before, but this is wild. Molly later told a friend, "If I end up dead, He 100% did it. But Molly was repeatedly reassured. Her family and the police itself told her that if she came forward, she would be helped. She would be protected. So in April 2024, after over 3 months of constant threats, constant violent actions against her, she did it. She did the single bravest thing she could possibly do. On Friday, April 5th, 2024, Molly walked into a Forbes police station and told them everything that was happening to her at the hands of her ex-boyfriend, Daniel. In the notes she gave to the police, she said, "I truly believe he will hurt me and he will not stop contacting me. I live in fear for my life, my family, and my animals." The police in Forbes took Molly's report. They listened, they believed her, and they acted. This alone was surprising to me because so often these reports aren't really even taken seriously in the first place, or they're constantly passed off. But the police did the right thing. They went out and they arrested Daniel. He was charged with that whole list of offenses, 3 counts of sexual intercourse without consent, 4 counts of stalking and intimidating her, the aggravated animal cruelty charge for killing her puppy, and then the property damage charge. The police also immediately took out an interim apprehended violence order, or an AVO, in Australia to legally protect her, and Daniel was in a holding cell and he was finally off the streets. That night he went to prison, Molly was finally safe. Her son was safe. And then came Saturday, April 6th, 2024, the day of the bail hearing. First of all, I didn't even know that hearings could take place on a Saturday, but this was the exact moment. This is the single point of failure where it all falls apart. The hearing was held at the Dubbo local court, and because it was a Saturday, there was no magistrate available to preside over the case. Instead, the hearing was conducted by a registrar. A registrar is a court officer. They are not a judge like a magistrate, and they do not have the same level of legal training as a magistrate. They are allowed to assist in managing cases from filing to final hearing, but they mainly assist in the running of the court, like managing case documents, court lists, etc. This administrative detail, the day of the week, the case being heard on a Saturday, is the first domino. The registrar asked the police prosecutor for their position on Daniel's bail application. The police prosecutor, the person whose job it is to argue for the safety of the public and of the victim, stood up in court and did not oppose bail. So the prosecutor allegedly said in regards to Daniel's application, "These are always difficult ones, registrar, because the defendant's got no criminal history, but the allegations are quite serious." Can we just sit with that for a second? So Daniel has no criminal history. No criminal history. He's standing in front of you on charges for, and I'm going to say it again, multiple rapes, 4 counts of stalking and killing a 12-week-old puppy. These aren't allegations of shoplifting. This is a textbook, flashing red flag, high-risk domestic violence profile. And the response from the state is, gosh, these are really difficult ones, these types of cases, It's infuriating. It's so dumb because they are the people that deal with cases like this on a regular basis. Just because he's got no criminal history doesn't mean he's never done this before. Just because it could be his first time doing this doesn't mean that, give him another chance. Why do our laws do this? Why isn't it as simple as commit a heinous crime, be charged appropriately? Is it hard for it to be that simple? I don't get it. So the registrar, hearing absolutely no opposition from the police prosecutor, noted that Daniel had no prior convictions, not crimes, just wasn't convicted in the past of anything, and despite calling the charges very serious themselves, granted him very strict bail. And just like that, Daniel Billings was released. He was free after 24 hours, maybe not even, in jail. Can you even begin to imagine the cold, sinking feeling that Molly must have felt from finally getting him arrested to him being released the very next day? She had done everything right. She went through the trauma of reporting it all. She had him arrested, and the system she was told to trust spat him right back out in less than 24 hours. She was now, as you can say, a sitting duck. She had reported him and he was free. She knew, and the police knew, that she was now in extreme danger. But there was one last layer of protection she was promised. Molly was immediately put in touch with a state government domestic violence program called Staying Home, Leaving Violence. Now, the entire point of this program is right there in its name. It's to provide security and support so that a victim, usually a woman with children, doesn't have to flee her home, move her kids, and go to a shelter. It's supposed to help her stay at home safely by intruder-proofing the house. So the local service provider for this program was a not-for-profit company called Housing Plus. On Monday, April 8th, 2024, just 2 days after Daniel was released, A caseworker from Housing Plus contacted Molly, and they contacted her again a few days later on Friday, April 12th, with assurances. They told her that an impending security upgrade for her home was coming. This wasn't, a vague promise of like, oh, we'll get to it, I promise. Her parents, Tony and Kate, said that Molly was told exactly what they were going to install. They apparently were going to put up barriers on her windows. They were going to install automatic lights. They were going to set up surveillance cameras. Like, they had told her exactly what they were going to do to protect her. Now, Molly was still terrified, but she had a little bit of hope. Her dad, Tony, recalled talking to her around that time, and he asked her, are you happy with the plan? And she told him, yeah, I am. I've already had people ring me up and say that they can help me and they can intruder-proof my house. Her mother, Kate, would later call these assurances what it was: false hope. Now, that's great. The program's great. I actually learned about this program through this case. I think it's a great program. But again, timing is the problem. In cases of domestic violence, of violence in general, time is of the essence. Molly is waiting to be protected, but until she actually is, she is doing just that, waiting with a big fat target on her back. Molly, a high-risk victim whose attacker was now free after she reported him, was now just waiting. She was waiting for the window barrier. She was waiting for the camera. She was waiting for the help that she was promised was on its way. I think 1 week was 1 week too late. And as you guessed it, that help never came. 14 days passed from that first call from Housing Plus. 16 days passed from the moment Daniel was released on bail. The automatic lights were never installed. The surveillance cameras were never put up. The barriers for her windows were never fitted. In the early hours of Monday, April 22nd, 2024, police received a call. They were asking to go to Molly's home on Young Street in Forbes to conduct a welfare check. When they arrived, they went inside and they found her. Molly Tyhurst was dead. She was just 28 years old. Police would later describe her killing as brutal. Court proceedings and her family would later confirm that she had died from stab wounds. Molly lived in that home with her 6-year-old son. The official reports I've read do not explicitly state whether her little boy was in the house at the time or if he was the one who found her. And for his sake and for his alone, we can only hope that he was shielded from the horror of what happened to his mom. But realistically, we know that's not always possible. And if he did live with her full time, you can only imagine the horror that poor baby experienced. My son is 6 and I don't want to think about it. As if this story was not already saturated with tragedy, the family was dealt another cruel blow. In the days following Molly's murder, while her home was still a crime scene being processed by police, thieves broke in. They broke into her home and stole precious, irreplaceable items. Among the things they took was this gold nugget pendant, and it was actually a gift from her father, Tony. He had picked it out for her specifically because it looked like a woman holding a child. It's just this level of cruelty that's so hard to comprehend. Like, I can't imagine that in that small town, the thieves were not aware of what happened in that house. It would have been all over the news, the talk of the town. And duh, it would have had crime scene tape up, right? But those people still chose to rob a victim's home. It's wild. So the police discover Molly's body, and this immediately becomes obviously a homicide investigation. And let's be honest, there was only one suspect. This was not a whodunit, this was a where is he? The entire police force in the region knew exactly who they were looking for: Daniel Billings, the man who was on bail for allegedly raping and stalking her, the man who had just been released by the court just 16 days prior on apparently strict conditions. They were so strict, but he still was able to do this. But he wasn't at his house. He had fled. The manhunt, however, was incredibly short. Police resources were laser focused, and just half an hour later, only 30 minutes or so after Molly's body was found, police located Daniel. This is honestly unheard of. He wasn't in Forbes. He was actually at a friend's house in a tiny rural town called Fifield, which is about 100 kilometers or about 60 miles away from Molly's house. He was arrested on the spot. The next day, April 23rd, 2024, Daniel Billings was formally charged with the murder of Molly Ticehurst. And the most sickening, twisted irony of it all is that he was also charged with breaching that AVO that was meant to keep him away from her and also failing to comply with his bail conditions. He had his first court mention at Orange Local Court and he didn't appear, but the magistrate, David Day, formally revoked his bail on all of the earlier charges. And even he was noted to have said that it was not good enough, that what happened was not good enough. Yeah, it's a bit too late for that. Daniel was sent to remand where he would remain, this time behind bars. Now, we don't know exactly what happened the night Daniel entered Molly's home and did this horrific act. However, there are a few things he did prior that kind of show who he was. So in mid-April, after he was released on bail, he told a friend that he was innocent of all these sexual assault allegations Molly made against him. He said it was all lies, and if I'm going to do the time, I may as well do the crime. He told friends that he was worried about paying for lawyers and how this would impact him financially. And then on April 20th, 2024, he went to a tobacconist in Parks where he bought a hunting knife. He then wrote on bail documentation that he was innocent of the crimes he was being charged with. And then he apparently also wrote a suicide note saying, "Make me out to be a monster, treat me like an animal. Then okay, I'm going to play the fucking part." He also ranted that the final straw came when his Queensland team singlet was thrown in the dirt by police. He then recorded a video on his phone talking about his Queensland boxing singlet being disrespected by police. And he said, "That singlet done me. That is when I started getting thoughts in my head. Oh, maybe just fucking drive over there. And she reckons I was gonna go through the fucking window and cut her head off or something. Maybe I might do that." So over the course of the videos recorded between 2:09 p.m. and 5:52 p.m., he apologized to the people in his life, discussed having steak for dinner, and what clothes he would wear during the murder. He also talked about taking Molly out for a drive later that night. At 10:35 p.m., he leaves his home in Parks and drove over to Molly's home in Forbes. And at 11:27 p.m., Daniel broke into Molly's home using her bedroom window. He then used that same hunting knife to stab Molly over 15 times. He stabbed her to death in a fury. He then left and drove away in his car. Guys, it took him exactly 59 seconds to do all of that. He then recorded another video saying, "I've just murdered my girlfriend. I cannot believe I did that." He went on to say that he's not going to be arrested because he'll kill himself. And then he goes to that friend's house and tells her, "I killed her. I've got to wrap my car around a tree because I can't get arrested." So that friend then saw blood on Daniel's hands and then immediately went inside and called the police. And she said, "I've got a man named Daniel Billings here. He's in the system and he's just turned up at our house to say that he's killed someone." And this is the same place where Daniel was later arrested. For Molly's family, the trauma was far from over. The system had already failed to protect their daughter, and now they had to face that same system to get justice for her. What followed was not a quick trial. It was an agonizing 18-month wait dragged out by the system. The case just kept getting delayed, adjournment after adjournment, and first in December of 2024, the court was told that Daniel needed to be mentally assessed, and then throughout 2025, the case was repeatedly pushed back for what they called lengthy legal negotiations happening behind the scenes. And at one point, the hearing was even delayed because of a prison guard strike at Goulburn Supermax prison, which meant that his legal aid lawyers hadn't been able to actually speak to him, therefore we can't get his instructions. And every single time, at every single one of these brief procedural mentions, Molly's family was there. Her parents, Tony and Kate, showed up in court, sat in the gallery, and faced the system that had let them down so badly, only to be told to come back another day, in another few weeks. So I've personally experienced this in court matters, and it was frustrating to me. Their frustration was just blinding, as you can imagine. Her father, Tony, said to reporters, "It seems to me that in life, the system let Molly down, and in death continues the same route. Instead of getting closure, all we get is anxiety, sadness, and heartache." And he was absolutely right. It's just the way it is sometimes, and it's hard to understand. Finally, on Friday, November 14th, 2025, like 2 weeks ago, it came to a head. It had been more than 18 months since Molly was killed. Daniel Billings, now 30, appeared in court via video link, and he was on screen in his prison greens with dreadlocks in his hair from the Goulburn Supermax jail. His legal aid solicitor, Diane Elston, confirmed the plea. Daniel himself only spoke to acknowledge the magistrate, saying, "Yes, Your Honor." Daniel Billings pleaded guilty to the domestic violence murder of Molly Ticehurst. As part of the plea bargain, he also pleaded guilty to 3 or 4 other charges, including breaching the AVO and, very importantly, the aggravated animal cruelty charge for killing Molly's puppy. In exchange for this guilty plea, the prosecution dropped 12 other charges, which included several of the sexual assault and stalking offenses. And this is really common, though often very painful. It's a very painful part of plea bargaining. You drop the lesser charges to guarantee a conviction on the more serious ones, the murder one, and spare the family the trauma of a full drawn-out trial. But the perpetrator doesn't actually face the charges of everything that he's done. It's actually so effed up. In the courtroom, Molly's mother, Kate, sat watching the screen. Her hand was held over her mouth for most of the time. But the support for the family was not just in the court. Outside the Forbes courthouse, a crowd of about 50 local people had gathered, and they were there to support the Ticehurst family, many of them wearing t-shirts that said, "She matters." When Molly's family emerged from the court, that crowd of 50 people, they burst into applause. Molly's dad, Tony, was visibly very emotional, and he thanked the people of Forbes for their support. And a reporter asked him if this guilty plea, finally gave him any sense of closure. And his answer was, "Of course you don't get closure from something like this. There's no closure from it. None. I guess they can stop calling him the accused now, though." Daniel Billings was formally convicted of murder, and his case was moved to the New South Wales Supreme Court for his sentence hearing. So I'll keep you guys updated on what his sentence will finally be. So my ending question, what could have happened differently in this case? And the answer is everything. This case is such a tragedy, but more than that, it's one of the most preventable murders we have covered on this channel. The what ifs are they're just maddening. What if the police prosecutor had done their job? What if they stood up on that Saturday and said, "Your Honor, the state strenuously opposes bail. This man is a high-risk offender who has committed stalking, animal cruelty. And, we believe that the victim is in extreme danger, along with the fact that she has, a small child to care for. How about we just keep him in jail for a little bit longer?" What if the law hadn't allowed a registrar to make this decision, in the first place? At least dismiss the hearing until it was a weekday and a magistrate could hear it and take into account everything that had happened. What if the Staying Home Leaving Violence program and their provider, Housing Plus, had actually done what they had promised? What if they had treated an active high-risk case with urgency? What if they had installed those cameras, those window barriers, those lights on Monday, April 8th, instead of just never? Molly would have been aware Daniel was trying to come into her home, and she could have at least called the police and had some safety from those window barriers until at least help arrived. Or even if she was hurt by Daniel, say he managed to get in, which, sometimes these people, they want to hurt you. They're going to do everything they can. Even if that had happened and she had been able to call the police, at least help would have, you don't know, but at least help would have been someone on the way to help save her from her wounds. Who knows how long she was lying there just dying. I mean, it's horrific. Molly Ticehurst was failed. She was failed by the justice system that let her attacker go, and she was failed in parallel by the support system that gave her false hope and left her unprotected. I can't even imagine what that program feels, Shit, we should have just done it that day. We should have gotten people on an urgent basis. Her funeral was held at Forbes Rugby Club in May 2024, and it seemed to stop the nation as homes across the entire town of Forbes turned their porch lights on in Molly's honor. Her little boy, you guys know kids get to me, her little boy said some words at the funeral that I can't believe even a little boy had to find the words to say goodbye to his mother. He said, "Dear Mum, I love you. I miss our holidays together and our tickle fights. I miss you a lot, and I will love you every day and night. You are the best mom in the world." But her death and the sheer preventability of it made people mad. It sent this shockwave across Australia, and it's honestly on the news every day. The community in Forbes, the Ticehurst family, and the advocates across the country refused to let Molly be just another statistic. They rallied, they wore those "She Matters" t-shirts, they showed up to court, and their anger, their grief, forced the New South Wales government to act. The state's Premier, Chris Minns, immediately launched a review into the bail laws and the circumstances of Molly's death. So the changes were pretty quick, and they are now widely known as Molly's Law. That happened so quick. This is her legacy, and it's not a small one. These are massive, tangible changes to the law designed to stop exactly what happened to her from ever happening again. So first, they stripped local court registrars of the power to hear bail applications for serious domestic violence offenses. So all bail decisions for these high-risk crimes must now be heard by a magistrate or judge. And this Saturday, loophole is closed. Second, they created this show cause threshold for high-risk domestic violence offenders like Daniel Billings was. So this completely flips the script. Before, the prosecutor had to prove why the accused should be detained, but now the accused has to show cause. They have to prove to the court why their detention is not justified. So essentially, why should they be released? The he has no prior criminal history excuse now is no longer an easy pass. And third, electronic monitoring. So the new law mandates that high-risk offenders who are for some reason still granted bail, which in most cases will be required to wear a GPS ankle monitor. And this isn't really a passive thing. It's kind of good because it allows police to be alerted immediately if an offender breaches their AVO by entering an exclusion zone, so near a victim's home, their work, or their child's school. Molly Ticehurst should be alive. Her son should have had his mom. She should still be walking down the streets in Forbes, being greeted by all those kids yelling, "It's Molly." She was let down. She was let down catastrophically by every single part of the system that was supposed to protect her. But her legacy and the incredible, tireless fight of her family has built a new shield for others who might be facing the same thing. Molly's law is now a real, tangible thing that is already saving lives. Her life mattered. Thank you all for listening to Molly's story, and let me know your thoughts down below. I will leave some resources down in the description for anyone that needs help, like I always do, and I will see you in next week's video. Besitos, guys. Bye.